Negative, say nothing further. Just kitty cammy in the corner. I'm running over here now.
Sometimes putting on the uniform makes you a target.
In pursuit of suspect. West on Hall Road.
This is The War on Police, a national nightmare. Presented by Prepare to Act.
Backup is en route.
And here's your host, Chris Marciano.
And I know it's been a long time. I understand. I'm trying my best here to get information out through my podcast and figure out just the chaos of an unstructured, retired life, but I'm slowly getting there. So I'm finally getting this podcast together after doing some research for probably too long. But the more I dig into this, the more interesting I'm finding it, especially the police accountability bill that I want to talk about a little bit today and kind of trace back its origins and how exactly it is affecting law enforcement on a daily basis. First, I definitely want to give a shout out to all my friends and family that reached out to me after the first podcast to give me some support and give me some advice on how to make this better. So I'm going to try a little bit of inflection, and I'm going to try a little bit more of Chris's personality coming out throughout this podcast. And unfortunately, within that personality, I tend to swear and use foul language. So it's just who I am. It's the way the podcast is going to go. I feel like if it's not me, it's too structured. It feels kind of ordinary and boring. And that's not what I want this to be. I want to keep your interest, and I want to move forward, spreading this word and protecting our law enforcement brothers and sisters across the country. Also, with that said, we're going to touch base and talk about the different parts of, as I mentioned, the police accountability bill earlier. And a lot of that is transparency and the idea that the public needs to know more information than they necessarily should back in the day as we learn how to become structured and more efficient and effective law enforcement officers. And no clearer case was with this Idaho college murders, where we felt the need as a public that we needed more information from the state, local, and federal authorities as they investigated this terrible 4-person homicide. And as we complained about the fact that there was not enough information coming out, we finally made an arrest of this asshole. And we are starting to get a little bit more information regarding the case and regarding the murders. And yet I still hear people complaining that we don't have a motive and all this stuff. But it's not our business to know this yet. It's not our right to know this yet. I think the police department did a great job with that investigation. And I give them credit for whatever that it's worth for me. So let's talk about this police accountability bill a little bit. It came out in 2020. And what it did essentially was it created an office of the Inspector General, which we never had before. And its specific responsibility is to investigate complaints of police misconduct. And it allows them a great deal of authority over how law enforcement does their job, how discipline is distributed to the officers. It took a lot away from our guys and officers, including consent searches and no-knock warrants, which, if you're not in law enforcement, these are two things that we rely on specifically to do our jobs in a safe and effective manner. And one of the things that it did, and I'm going to kind of bounce all over the place here, is it took away a consent search and a motor vehicle stop. So if our guys are out there stopping cars and they suspect that there's something suspicious within the vehicle or something dangerous, there was a time in our profession that we could ask the driver for a consent to search the vehicle. And it was at that time that the driver, if he had no probable cause, if the officer had no probable cause to get in the car, the driver could say, no, you're not getting in my car, and do what you got to do so I can be on my way. But at least it afforded the officers the opportunity to put a little bit of suspicion in the driver's mind. And, surprisingly, there's been times in my career that people have allowed me to search their vehicle and I found illegal substances, dangerous weapons. This police accountability bill took that away from our officers. So we can't even ask the driver if we could search their vehicle anymore. If we have probable cause to get in the car, that's a different story. It also took away the power from our officers to ask for identification from passengers within the vehicle. That was also something back in the day that we could ask for identification. Now we can't even ask for identification. And we start getting into these transparency laws and these idiots on social media with their name and badge number. It's the law. I want your supervisor here. We've empowered these people to interact that way, which takes attention away from our officers that are trying to do a job effectively, but trying to do a very dangerous job safely so they can return home to their families. Now they're getting questioned by 17-year-old kids that are not allowed to smoke weed wherever they want to, however often they want to, making it, an easy thing to do. And now it's created an environment within our law enforcement that makes us look like the bad guy. That's just one little piece of the accountability bill that has affected how we do police work. That used to be effective, and now it's simply not effective. But in order to understand the accountability bill, we got to do a little bit of history. We got to go back a little bit. And within that history, a question for you, the listener, does the name Henry Louis Gates ring a bell to you? I'm not sure if it does. It may not. Henry Louis Gates was a Harvard professor. He had forgotten his keys to get into his house, and the Uber driver that was driving him back to his house kind of helped him break into his house to access it because he couldn't get in. A neighbor saw someone breaking in the house. They called the Cambridge Police Department. Cambridge Police Department showed up, specifically Sergeant James Crowley. There was an exchange between the sergeant and Mr. Gates within the residence. To be honest with you, I didn't do the research to find out exactly. I didn't watch the body camera because it's not necessarily important for my point. Ultimately, Mr. Gates was arrested for misdemeanor. I believe it was a breach of peace or something. Was it wrong? Yeah, of course it was wrong. Are law enforcement officers bad? 1% of them are bad. And nobody hates a bad officer as much as a good officer. Okay, so let's get that clear. I'm not supporting all police officers because there are police officers out there that, in my opinion, that were picked on in high school, and now they have something to prove. Instead of putting on a badge to serve the public and be helpful, they want to pound their chest and think that they're better than everybody else. I'm not saying that was the case with Sergeant Crowley. I'm just saying that shit happens, and yes, there is a percentage of police officers out there that I would dislike dealing with my family. Anyway, we go back to that situation. It was in July of 2009, and what happens after that is our president at the time, Barack Obama, who did a lot of politicking in his path to become president to calm the racial and prejudice divide amongst our country, made some public comments that I'm going to play here in twofold. I'm going to play the initial part of his press conference where he was asked about the case and his initial comment regarding what transpired between Sergeant Crowley and Mr. Gates, after he states that he doesn't know much about it, but he's going to comment that out anyway.
Professor Gates is already in his house. The police officer comes in. I'm sure there's some exchange of words, but my understanding is that Professor Gates then shows his ID to show that this is his house. And at that point, he gets arrested for disorderly conduct, charges which are later dropped.
Here you go. What he says is I'm sure there was some exchange of words. And then President Obama explains that Mr. Gates kindly handed over his identification, and then randomly and shockingly, he was arrested for a misdemeanor summons. I've done law enforcement for 25 years, and everyone has this story, right? Including officers, that we have three sides to every story, right? You have his side, my side, and somewhere in the middle lies the truth. You cannot tell me that there was a polite exchange between Sergeant Crowley and Mr. Gates, or all of a sudden Mr. Gates was just arrested for a misdemeanor trespassing summons that was later kicked out, as Mr. President Obama suggests. So there's a hint there that says that, in my opinion, Mr. Gates was correct. The officer was wrong, completely wrong. But then it became clearer to me as President Obama continues with his comments, and this is what he says next.
Now, I don't know, not having been there and not seeing all the facts, what role race played in that. But I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly in arresting somebody when there was already proof that they were in their own home. And number three, what I think we know separate and apart from this incident is that there is a long history in this country of African Americans and Latinos being stopped by law enforcement disproportionately. And that's just a fact.
So right off the bat, President Obama admits that, I wasn't there, so he can't be sure what the case was. and he doesn't know, quote unquote, what role race played in it. He called the police stupid or acted stupidly. This is the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world. And separate and apart from that, his words, there's a long-standing history that Hispanics and African Americans are stopped in disproportionately. This is not a podcast at this point about race. For those of you that know me, I'm the least, there's not a racist bone in my body. But this is bullshit, right? This is the president of the United States setting a tone that starts to show what his true colors and feelings are regarding the police department. So as we fast forward in history, that was 2009, 2013 in July, we see the Black Lives Matter movement begin. And then in 2015, President Obama does something that no president has done before. He creates a committee. It's called the 21st Century Policing Report. That's what he charged them to do, is to create a 21st century policing report on how we can, quote unquote, to identify action items on how police can promote effective crime reduction while still building public trust. Okay. This is in 2014. Within that, the committee finds 6 pillars that they've identified that will help police interact with the public easier and better, as well as reduce crime across our country. Those 6 pillars are: 1, building trust and legitimacy. Pillar 2 is policy and oversight. Pillar 3 is technology and social media. Pillar 4, community policing and crime reduction. Pillar 5, training and education. And Pillar 6, officer wellness and safety. Okay, now I want you to be clear on this. In 2019, 2020, I was studying diligently for the potential to be promoted to our deputy chief position at my local police department. And this report, the 21st Century Policing Report, was at the top of the list to learn this. And what we start looking at is when we fast forward a little bit, we fast forward through the George Floyd incident, right? May of 22. Listen, it shouldn't have happened. Again, 1% of police officers in the country are just assholes and shouldn't be cops. Whatever that cop's name was, it was completely inappropriate and wrong. And I'm not commenting on anything. Nobody should die like that. But it was wrong. But BLM took it and ran with it, and rightly so to a certain extent. But we're going to fast forward now from May of 2020 to 2020, and we're going to move forward to July of 2020 when we released the Police Accountability Bill. And as we started to discuss before, created the Inspector General Office. And within this unit and within this committee, it has a random number of people on it. There's some police chiefs. There are victims of crimes on there. There are people on there that have been convicted of felonies. And these are people that are writing a bill to tell me how to do my job. Right. So you have chiefs of police that haven't been on the road in a long time. They're separate from that. Victims that are jaded, convicted felons that are jaded. And you expect them to come forward with a bill that's going to be effective for me to do my job safely while preventing crime to keep your family safe. And as we have seen, those things don't work hand in hand. If you don't believe me, take a quick look at some videos from Portland and the epidemic that's happening out there with the reported population living on the streets that act like zombies, crazy people that are legitimately. 2 officers walked up on somebody the other day. The man was eating another man's ear right off his head. I want you to process that. Right in daylight in Portland, there was a man eating another man's ear off his head. These are these laws that we're creating that are allowing certain types of drugs and narcotics. Well, I shouldn't say narcotics, but drugs to be legalized across our country. And if we're talking about history and we're talking about the fact that narcotics, drugs are becoming more and more legal and accessible, we talk about the fact that Connecticut will soon be, if they're not already, selling marijuana recreationally. But basically, anyone 21 years and older can walk into a store and buy marijuana. Listen, I don't care what you do, right? You want to smoke weed? I don't care. Smoke weed. If it affects my family or the safety of my family, then I got a problem with it at that point. But if you're smoking weed, that's your choice. Just keep it away from me. But you can't keep it away from me. I walked into the West Farms Mall last week with my 2 children and my wife, and all I smelled was weed. I don't want to smell weed. Okay. I'm not a stickler. I'm not a prude. I don't want to smell fucking weed every time I want to walk around. I don't want my 6-year-old going, that smells like marijuana. Right. But these are the laws that we're passing. So let's do this for real quick as an example so you understand where we're going with this, because what happens progressively is they get a little and they take a lot. right? Give them a little rope and they're going to end up hanging themselves as we move along. So let's do this for history. In Colorado, they legalized medical marijuana in 2000. Okay, let's follow along. Colorado legalized medical marijuana in 2000. Connecticut legalized the use of medical marijuana in 2012. In 2012, Colorado legalized marijuana for personal use. Okay, 12 years later. In 2021, Connecticut legalizes marijuana for personal use. Okay, so what are we doing? We got a little and we're going to take a lot. We're going to take a little bit more. So what happens now is Colorado begins to sell legalized marijuana from public stores in 2014. Connecticut decides it's a great idea, and we're going to start doing this in 2023. So at 21 years old, you don't need a job anymore, by the way, because it's COVID and we don't go to fucking work anymore. So just go to the store and buy some weed and you're going to be all set. But here's what I want you to understand, because I'm not sure how many people know this. So follow that progression from Colorado with the idea of like legalizing weed, right? It's all good. In November of 2022, voters in Colorado passed a ballot initiative to decriminalize the possession of and legalize limited use of psychedelic mushrooms and other plant and fungi-derived psychedelic drugs by those 21 years of age and older. So they got a little, and now they're taking more. Now it's legalized to buy mushrooms in Colorado. What's next? Welcome to Portland, where meth is everywhere. PCP is everywhere. You have officers dying because of this shit. But it's all good. As you can see, I'm getting excited about this, and this podcast may start going a little bit longer than it should. But my point in talking about the police accountability bill and the 21st century policing bill that was initiated by President Obama, who wanted to calm racial injustices and prejudices across the country, but instead poked the flame of it. Remember the beer summit he had with that Professor Gates and the police officer, and are now infallible. President Biden with the beer summit, wherever they were, the press everywhere. It was bullshit, and they want us to believe things that are simply not true. Here's my point. Is the 21st century policing report came out and the police accountability bill came out, and they mirror each other in certain ways. The accountability bill was written off the 21st century policing report, and it was written by people that don't know how to be cops and are politically appointed, most of them. So that's where we are that way. But part of what we want to talk about real quickly is this elimination of cash bail, right? So what bail is, and this is right from the Connecticut judicial site. Bail is the amount set by police, bail staff, or judge to make sure that a person goes to court or returns to court if they are released after they have been arrested. That's right from the Connecticut judicial website. So as I was sergeant, I would be responsible for setting bonds, and we would look at a lot of different things. We'd look at criminal history. We would look at whether this person had a job, a home, and we would also look at the severity of the crime. Now what we've done is we've said, listen, it's not fair for people that don't have money to set a bond on them and hold them in jail. California, shockingly, was the first state to completely eliminate the bail system. And most recently, it was New York. They eliminated, so New York eliminated what's called pretrial detention and cash bail. So basically, like, we're not going to set a bond on you if it's a misdemeanor or nonviolent felony. In that specific investigation, we're not going to set a bond on you. So we're going to arrest you. We're going to bring you to jail. We'll take your fingerprints, take your photo, give you a bottle of water. We're going to send you on your way to go do whatever you want to do. California started that. New York was in there too. There's other states that I don't want to get into. But so for New York, it was effective January 1st, 2020. It would eliminate all pretrial detention and cash bail for an estimate of 90% of all arrests. So throughout the state of New York, 90% of all arrests that they made fell into the category of this bail elimination and cash bail elimination. It's not even an option anymore for misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. So what they're doing is they're looking at that specific crime, but they're not looking back at any past crimes, right? So if somebody gets arrested for whatever, it may be it's a misdemeanor or nonviolent non-felony, and they get released on bond, but they don't base that bond on criminal history. So what if he was arrested last week for aggravated assault or sexual assault or domestic violence? We don't care about that shit anymore because it was just this little incident was, so they broke a window at Verizon and stole some cell phones. It's nonviolent. So they're going to get a cash bond and sent on their way. And then when they go to the judge, it's going to get exonerated anyway. So we're not taking into consideration past criminal history, which is dangerous. You start seeing these animals on the street doing what they want to, attacking what they want to, including the two New York City police officers that were attacked with machetes. Great idea. So the reason that they give is I'm reading off my notes here just to make sure that I get it right, is they felt that the way that bond system worked is we were clogging up the system too much. Their jails were too crowded. But if you look back at a study done from 2018 by the Prison Policy Initiative, there was more than 500,000 people in the United States that were detained in jails before their trials in 2018. So 500,000 people were held in jail before their trials, pretrial hearings, based on the bond system back in the day. Within the first year of the new system in place, getting rid of cash bail and the pretrial incarceration or detention, that population dropped by 20%. Okay, so let's figure this out real quick. We had 500,000 people in jail waiting to go to trial. Bail and the bail commission reform comes out, and we say to 100,000 people, that's 20%. 100,000 people, hey, sorry, you could leave now and just go back. Just be a good boy and girl and come back to court when you're ready, because we can't hold you. And I think that this is going to become one of your favorite podcasts of all time, and you're going to share this to everybody. You're going to tell your moms and your fathers and your brothers and your sisters and your friends and other police officers and just everybody to support Prepare to Act and my new podcast. I bought a little microphone cover to take away the echo. I'm not sure if it's working. And by the way, how cool is my intro music? We started touching base on the police accountability bill and the 21st Century Policing Report. We're going to go into that a little bit more in depth on the next episode, because I want to dive into these pillars a little bit and explain the narrative that's written inside these, as far as, the police officers, they try to bullshit us to say that they're supporting us, these politicians and things. And they're saying that we need to be able to do our jobs in a way that our community and the people within our community trust us to do our jobs and believe that we have the authority to do our jobs. And what have they done since then? Since 2015, when that police report when the 21st Century Policing Report has come out, is they've continued to bash the law enforcement officers across the country. They've continued to take our powers away from us. They've continued to paint us in a bad light, so it shows that we don't have the authority to do it. And now we have these asshole TikTokers and YouTubers coming up demanding badge and identifications, or walking into police lobbies and recording people that are in there that were just victims of a sexual assault or certain specific crimes that changed their life. And they have these people saying that they have the right to do so. And they never show their faces on these social media channels either. So it just shows what a bunch of bitches they are, and that they're not confident enough to show their face. But so it's funny to me that these committees that get put together want to support the police department by saying that we need that support, but they don't give us the support, right? They don't give our law enforcement brothers and sisters across the country the confidence, the authority, or the backing from administration and mayors and politicians to say, yeah, go do your job, because this is insane. It's insane what's happening across our country. It's insane how these people think that they can just hurt people, how they can just take drugs, how they can steal whatever they want to, or take whatever they want to. It's not safe. And it's not going to be safe until this shit gets turned around. So it's annoying. It's frustrating. And again, I apologize. It took me a minute to get out, but it's Chris. This is who I am. All right. This is how we go. Follow me, please. Share this, comment, get me out there, because I want to be the word and the spokesman for our law enforcement brothers and sisters that can't do it themselves. After 25 years of spending that time creating, I'll be honest with you, weak leaders and weak police officers. Not completely, but there's a handful out there that are hurting us. Anyway, thanks for listening. Please share this. Please get it out there. Please stay safe. Please don't take any shit. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for our law enforcement. Help me get this message out there. Stay safe till next time. Thanks.